This video is for anatomy, and we are going to be going over 4 things: reviewing the menstrual cycle, female infertility, menopause, as well as fertilization. So what I did, because I'm assuming that menstrual cycle video probably was confusing. So what you can see on the bottom of your screen here is that I wrote down the steps basically. So if you also go through more of the PowerPoint, it'll tell you in that written in red, what exactly is going on. But the gist of a menstrual cycle is that you have 2 different events going on simultaneously. You have luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone released from a woman's brain that goes down to her ovary and tells the follicles to start growing. Now, a follicle, remember, is basically a bunch of material that's around the egg. So the follicle starts growing. And every time a woman has a cycle, she might have 15 to 20 follicles growing at a time, which means every time she has a cycle, whether she gets pregnant or not, she's losing 15 to 20 eggs at the same time too. Estrogen and progesterone, then at the same time that the follicle is growing, the ovary is going to release progesterone and estrogen, which go to the uterus and tell the uterus to thicken the lining of the uterus and make it more vascular, so that if a fertilized egg was available, it has somewhere to implant on the uterine wall. In the middle of the cycle, whenever that might be, estrogen goes up, LH goes up, and that causes or tells the ovary it's time to release the egg. And hopefully you guys watched that ovulation video. It's a little bit creepy looking, but hopefully you watched it from the previous day. And then what happens, once that egg's released, it's going to go to the uterus through the fallopian tube and wait for a sperm. The ovary then, until a fertilized egg implants in the uterine wall, an ovary is still going to make estrogen and progesterone until it basically doesn't get a signal from the egg anymore. So the egg, a fertilized egg, will keep sending signals back to the ovary saying, you should still keep this uterine lining, need to keep it, need to keep it, need to keep it, until the fertilized egg gets big enough that it's going to start making its own hormones to maintain that uterine lining. So most of the time, a woman is not pregnant. And so what happens is the egg eventually will stop, basically be reabsorbed, and will stop sending any sort of info back to the ovary. And so it will eventually just, estrogen and progesterone will decrease, and that causes that uterine lining to be released. And that's what a woman's period is. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about female infertility, menopause, and what happens actually when an egg is fertilized for a woman that, I kind of mentioned it, but what happens to maintain that uterine wall. So let's go to the female infertility, which I know I mentioned this before. Female infertility, there's a lot of things that can go wrong because you have 4 hormones that are all working a little bit differently. Here we go. 4 hormones that are all working differently. And so if you don't have LH and FSH, you probably aren't going to have any eggs or any follicles that are going to be telling that ovary to make follicles. So if I don't have any hormones telling me that, I'm never going to release an egg. At the same time, if I never have enough estrogen and progesterone, I'm never going to make a uterine lining that's thick enough. And that's what an egg needs to implant itself and start to actually grow a fetus. So fertility issues. So when a woman is fertile, at birth, a girl is born with approximately 1 million eggs. But as she is aging, whether she has a period or not, so even when you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you're still losing eggs every year. So by the time she reaches puberty, when she starts to have a period, she only has 300,000 left, which may not seem like, oh, that's a ton of eggs. But every time a woman's having a period, she's losing 15 to 20 of those eggs each time. Even if she gets pregnant, she's still losing that at the beginning of that cycle. And then even when a woman is pregnant, she's still going to be losing eggs because the eggs just start to die. And so 300 to 400 eggs are going to be ovulated, meaning that a woman is going to have 300 to 400 periods in her lifetime. But eggs are going to degenerate throughout a woman's lifetime. A lot of people say, oh, well, if you're on birth control, that's going to do something with the eggs. No, the only thing that birth control does with a woman is when she wants to get pregnant, it might take her body a little bit longer time to get back into its natural cycle of what are my hormones normally doing to release an egg. So that's the only thing that's happening with birth control. It's not, I've heard people say, well, I've been on birth control for 5 years, and so it's going to be super difficult to get pregnant. That's not true. It just takes your body, for any woman that's on birth control, a little bit longer to get into a normal cycle again once she decides she'd like to get pregnant. So causes with infertility, problems with ovulation. So like, for instance, you could be having a period your entire life and thinking, oh, I'm having a period, that must mean I'm ovulating and I'm releasing an egg. That's not always the case. If you don't have FSH and LH from your brain telling your ovary to make a follicle, to grow a follicle, and then to release an egg, you can still have your period and never have actual normal ovulation. Other issues can be that you are releasing an egg, but the egg doesn't have a way to get over to a uterus. So you can have this little narrow tube, a fallopian tube, that's blocked. Sometimes you can have endometriosis, and what that is, it's where uterine cells migrate to other parts of the female reproductive system or even parts of the abdominal cavity. And if those uterine cells get outside of the uterus, they're still going to do what the uterus does, which is when they get signals from progesterone and estrogen, they're still going to get a thickened uterine wall. And so think about if you have these uterine cells in your fallopian tube, basically going through a cycle just like the uterine cells do, you're going to have a thicker area every 28 days potentially, and that's going to block an egg from getting to the uterus. And then you can have other problems just with your uterus. Your uterus may not be the right shape. It may not respond correctly to the hormones. So with a woman, tons of different issues. And unfortunately, for a lot of women that have infertility, if you can't get pregnant, your OBGYN or fertility specialist is going to tell you, let's keep trying. We need to keep trying. Because if you think about it, in a year, you only have 12 times to get pregnant about. And with those 12 times, it's only a 24-hour window that you can get pregnant. And so it's not like there's a lot of times within a year that you can get pregnant. So they want you to try as much as possible. Or for as long as possible. And then another thing that's interesting is that if you can get pregnant, but you keep having miscarriages, they want you to keep getting pregnant because they want to see if they can figure out what it is. Is it you don't have the hormones to maintain the uterine wall, and so you miscarry every time because your progesterone and estrogen drop and signals your uterus to think that you don't have a fertilized egg? It could be because there's some genetic issue with the fetus. So there's a lot of different reasons why infertility can happen. And unfortunately, there's a lot of couples. I can probably count out of my friends, maybe a handful of us that did not have issues getting pregnant or having a baby. I think there's just more technology to figure out what's going on, what's going wrong. And so that's a good thing for you guys once you guys start to have kids. So that is, other things. Other things with infertility, a woman is going to be considered an elderly OBGYN patient if she is over 35, and here's why. How long have those eggs been there? They've been there 35 years. So they're maybe a little bit dusty or something. But the reason that you'd want a woman to not get pregnant as she ages is because her egg cells are that old. Just like nerve cells get damaged, cardiac cells get damaged, those egg cells can have damage, and you might be picking an egg cell that doesn't have the best genetic makeup anymore. Stress, poor diet, sometimes athletic training can cause a woman's period to not be regular. And so there are times that you might be someone that's running a lot or working out and you don't have a regular period, and then you want to get pregnant. You might have to scale back on doing that type of exercise so that you can get a regular period. Sometimes people that are overweight, underweight, their period's not the same. Alcohol, smoking, STDs, and then other health problems can cause issues with your hormones. And so sometimes if you're thinking about getting pregnant when you're old, not now, old, you might even consider going to talk to your OBGYN with your partner to figure out, you know, can they do an ultrasound to look at the ovaries and fallopian tubes and uterus to make sure everything's okay? Can you get your hormones tested? Because when you guys have kids in 5 to 10 years, hopefully it's longer than 5, closer to 10, that might be something that might be more commonplace, is to figure out what the infertility issue might be before you start trying to actually have the kids. So that finishes up infertility. I think I skipped the menopause slide over here. Oh, here we go. So menopause is what actually helps a woman not get pregnant when she gets older. Because if you are 40, your eggs are 40, and you don't necessarily want to be using a 40-year-old egg cell to get pregnant. And so basically, we're just going to look at the menopause slot, or the menopause bullet point. And we've talked about this before, but as a woman gets older, her estrogen levels are going to start to drop. If you think about, what does estrogen tell your uterus to do? It tells your uterus to build a uterine lining. And so if my estrogen levels get low, I don't have a uterine lining, and therefore I'm not going to have a period. And so it's a good thing, because you don't want to be having kids with 70-year-old eggs. A man, the reason he can father a child when he's 70 and everything's fine is because those sperm are maybe a couple days old, not 70 years old. And so there is a rhyme and reason for why we need menopause to actually happen. So it does happen between the ages of 45 or 50. And what can happen is your period will start becoming very irregular. I'm sure you guys have seen movies or know people who've had mood swings, hot flashes, things like that. And then what happens eventually is your estrogen levels get really low, and then your period just stops. Now, some women will take an estrogen, like not supplement, but man-made estrogen pills, because instead of it going like this and having all these side effects, you can kind of cause menopause to go a little bit more gradually down. So I have heard of women doing that. And then the last thing we want to talk about is fertilization, which there is a video that I'd like you guys to watch. That a couple things I want you to keep in mind. With fertilization, what you will remember is that when a man ejaculates, that he has millions of sperm, hundreds of millions of sperm, but by the time those sperm get to the egg, there's only going to be a couple hundred, because the vagina is very acidic. The cervix, which is the opening of the uterus, has lots of folds, and the sperm, or their tails, are going to get stuck in there and they're going to die. And then also, sperm is foreign to a woman's body. And so her immune system is going to go and fight off those sperm cells. Remember, an egg is only going to be viable for about 12 to 24 hours. Sperm can live for a few days. And so there really is a small, narrow opening to when a woman can get pregnant. But basically all fertilization is the sperm dropping off its genetic content and that fusing with the female's genetic content, which is in her egg cell. Now, once the sperm enters the actual egg cell, so not all this extra stuff, if you guys can follow the mouse, but not all this extra stuff that's around the egg cell. But once it gets into the egg cell, basically the egg cell is going to forbid any other sperm from getting in. And I'm sure we can imagine that if more than one sperm would be entering the egg, instead of having 46 chromosomes, we would have a much higher number of chromosomes, because every sperm cell would be dropping off 23, and you do not need that. And so once the fertilization occurs, it usually occurs in the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube then will help get that egg cell, the fertilized egg cell, into the uterus. Then hopefully the uterus will be a place where the egg cell can actually embed and be able to form an attachment and then actually grow into a fetus. So we will talk about fetal development and pregnancy, I think, next time. There's no homework today, but if you do have questions, let me know. I haven't got any questions yet, but if you guys do have questions about periods, birth control, fertilization, whatever it might be, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm trying to think if there's, I think that's about it. If you guys have any questions, though, please don't hesitate to ask. I hope that you guys are doing well. Oh, I guess I did have other fertilization stuff. I think I covered all that, though. Yeah, only 100 reach the site of fertilization, 100 sperm. You don't need to know the steps of fertilization. That's something I would have gone over in class with you guys. But if you guys do have questions, concerns, please let me know. I'm happy for criticism. If another teacher is doing something that's working better for you guys, don't hesitate to ask or say, this isn't working for us. I do miss you guys. I hope you guys are doing well. Remember that most of us do have a USI final to take for this class, and I am still working with that professor to figure out what that's going to look like and how that's going to be passed out. So be on the lookout for more information on that this week or next week. So hope you guys have a good day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.